That's it. Now, stop the bleeding. Focus. Good. You succeeded. Mastering your breathing. It will open many doors for you. Now, it won't solve everything, but it will help. You will continue to grow stronger.
Thank you.
Now's the vibrate. Y'all know what it is. The importance of acknowledging the subtle nuances of our experience and certain things that may be promoted in the spiritual, whether it's new age, spiritual. Because I feel like in some ways everybody then, in essence, said something to the nature of past lives. But ultimately, as a whole, like on a mainstream level, when past lives are brought up, it's never really fully explained. And I think more and more, like the whole past life thing and connection with ancestors needs to be refined more and more from the perspective of understanding it on a quantum level. Like now is the vibrate, the past and the future exists right now. So in essence, there's no such thing as past lives. And like on a whole nother level, because the reason why I thought of how this could be important, and matter of fact, shout out to Bridge on this one, when he mentioned that, he made a comment about us just not necessarily reincarnating, but some of us just incarnating for the first time. Hence why some of us have that energy we're not, necessarily of this plane of existence, and a lot of us almost be trying to leave, or been trying to leave most of our lives, And I was watching something in connection with past lives, and I'm seeing how a person past life, some certain aspects of it was in their present life. But then I thought about it, but I'm on a quantum level, that's all happening all at once. Kind of like the movie Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. If it's happening all at once, it's possible that, again, you may have just incarnated for the first time. Because think about that. We may associate, having all this, say, for instance, this is key. This shit is key. How having knowledge of, the wisdom of ancient civilizations and stuff like that, how some are just how it may be subtly, in some cases seen as because I reincarnated a lot. When that may not necessarily be the truth. Whereas more so you tapped into all of this ancient, history, her story, you tapped into all of this ancient wisdom and knowledge because you connected to it on a quantum level. Right now, the past still exists in essence, and I think before even going any further, having to drop the whole notion of if I can't explain it all logically in a book, then I shouldn't accept it. It's some things is just what it is, you know what I'm saying? It's the truth. And you may not be able to fully explain into words how could the past and the future be exactly right now. Like, show me every image and every diagram explaining this. It's like, it may not be, like that in essence, with a lot of things that goes into, the paradox and the deeper levels of knowledge, within the experience and just, being in general. But that key is that to, instead of always like, oh, past lives, thinking about it or looking at it from the perspective of the quantum level, I feel like, again, although certain moments I felt like now is the vibrate, not too far in the future, not too far in the past, right now. Although I had moments of feeling like it was corny and this and that, more and more I'm realizing like, nah, man, that's a great anchor point and a great reminder, because it indirectly just reminds like, the past and future simultaneously right now. Right now is the quote unquote, space travel machine or time travel machine is right now, because of the way our subconscious work and because we are creatures of habit, at least in the sense of like, within this experience, if we keep like, like, oh, past life, and past life, it just kind of takes us further. It could take one further away from the true understanding of like, all right, nah, this is a quantum type of thing. You have access to what we so-call the past, and that's another thing, like, for lack of a better word, is more so like we just saying past to kind of, again, to conceptualize it. But it's all simultaneously right now, because technically the future and the past is one and the same. So, again, it's all right now. But like that subtle aspect of it's not necessarily a past life, because again, our words is magic. What we keep repeating could be like a spell, what we keep saying out loud to others and what we keep repeating, and then we repeating it, you're saying it, then if you program your subconscious in a certain way due to keep repeating it, then you're giving off the vibration of it, and that's the true words anyway. The words is your vibration, and if you're vibrating on the frequency of, oh, it's a bunch of past lives, and I'm this wise because I reincarnated a bunch of times. When in essence, this might be your first incarnation. But just due to the fact that you are a being that has access to, to the entirety of the universe on a quantum level, you have access to what may be called ancient or what may be called futuristic. You have access to that in the now moment so strongly to where you might think that you reincarnated, and because you hear, and that's the thing, because you hear everybody repeating the shit. Quite literally, like repeating, like reincarnating, but then repeating the words like, oh, well, it's because a lot of incarnations I reincarnated a bunch of times, so that's why, you know what I'm saying? When in essence, this could possibly be, your first incarnation. And it's not to, again, for you to be like, oh, all right, I'll just take your word for it. I'm not expressing this because of that. I'm not trying to get you to, believe me, or just all of a sudden like, all right, this is my first incarnation. You gotta go through your own inner journey and awareness and have those aha moments for yourself. What I am doing is raising awareness to just show you though, like, with us coming out of amnesia and, just forgetting certain things, and then it's just certain phrases and, things that's just constantly said when it comes to spirituality that's not as accurate as it could be. And it creates, again, like one little, how they say that, like where, if I create an angle that's like, let's say like an angle, like everything on a straight line, and then it hit a bump and it angles off just a little bit. Yeah, it may, when it first bumps off just a little bit, it's only like an inch apart from that path. But then you go further down and it starts to separate further and further. And if you look at, the path, and not to say that it's linear, but just for example, this is the path. And that one bit of, knowledge that wasn't as accurate, bam, kind of comes up and starts to go out. Again, at first it's like only an inch away from the path, but then when you travel further down the way, it's like 10 miles away from what's really meant, or what the path really is, you feel me? So again, it be those little subtleties, like, so, the whole like, like just automatically equating that to, I reincarnated a bunch of times, when in essence it's more so you have, because it's two different things, again, like the past lives, ancestors, in essence kind of one and the same, in the sense of like you have a quantum connection, like you're simultaneously experiencing a lot of the things that your ancestors experienced. You're simultaneously, experiencing, on a quantum level, like quote unquote, not past lives, but more so different dimensions. And to really put it in perspective, let's say in a dimension, where there's a dimension, well, to put it in perspective like this, let's just say, again, what seems to be the past, I'm trying to think of a good example. All right, let's use this university as an example. So at the University of Arizona in Tucson, they got this building called the Old Main, OLDMAIN, Old Main. And it was one of the first and the only buildings, like if you look at old pictures of the beginning of, Tucson as a city, or the University of Arizona, Old Main gonna be the only building kind of just sitting like almost like in the middle of the desert, you know what I'm saying? And that's quote unquote what the past looked like, you know what I'm saying, within this realm, within the physical. That was quote unquote the past. But ultimately, right now, you have access to a dimension or a timeline that resembles when Old Main, that building, was sitting out there by itself. And because you hear everybody say, oh yeah, that's the past, or you take it as a time thing of like, all right, that is the past, like that's a past timeline, when really it's a current timeline. You have access, like what you have an access to is all happening right now. Again, everything, everywhere, all at once, all at once, right now. There's not necessarily a time in between it. That's also what Interstellar, the movie, was getting into as well with that. And of course, the other movies, but that's the first thing that come to mind. It's like, like in that moment when those books, referencing Interstellar, in that moment when those books was falling off the shelf, he was also already in space, and went on that little space mission already, that had already happened and was simultaneously, in a now moment, because those books falling was actually him trying to send a message to himself. So it wasn't no past and future. It was all happening in the moment. It wasn't no past reincarnation. It was in the moment. It wasn't no futuristic shit. It was in the moment. And so, with that being said, just being aware of like when we use the whole like reincarnating and past lives and shit like that, like to also understand that, or just keep reminding ourselves of like, we may say reincarnation or past lives, in essence, for it to be conceptualized, or for a person to in essence kind of get what we're saying or what we're talking about. But for the most part, it's a quantum situation, and even quantum being a word, for a lack of better word, you know what I'm saying? Again, there's all these things we explaining with words that didn't even, you know what I'm saying, that can't even box in these experiences, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is stuff that goes beyond what words could even really explain, But just remembering that it's, quantumly happening simultaneously all at once. Because imagine if, everybody, and that's where the key be, like, especially when, it's not to put no pressure on ourselves, or as if, we're responsible for other people's lives in that sense of it. But it's like, let's just say you're the type of person that everybody looks up to, and they listen to your every word. Then I want to make sure that, I'm more so, first and foremost, like, I'm just making sure I'm accurate for my own self and my own well-being. And then secondly, if I'm going to share, I'm going to do my best to make sure I'm being as accurate as possible. Because if I keep like, oh yeah, reincarnation and past lives and reincarnation, oh yeah, I'm just that wise because of all the times I reincarnated, Now, again, everybody's, speaks the way they speak, and you know what I'm saying? Again, sometimes we may share things in certain moments, but it may be more meant that, all right, yeah, it's all happening right now. But ultimately, just being aware of that, because when we just keep giving off the sound bite of, oh yeah, I'm aware of this quote unquote ancient knowledge because I reincarnated a bunch of times. And again, some may have had some type of spiritual experiences where they may have seen themselves reincarnate a bunch of times per se. But I definitely feel like it's not as much as reincarnation, as much as is, having access to, different quote unquote timelines or different spaces, different dimensions, all at once, And before I go, also, this is not to say that reincarnation is not real, because I feel the fact that recycling exists in the realm, then maybe there must be some form of quote unquote, reincarnation, so to speak. And the key is to understand that, everything is all interconnected, everything is all one, but there's still different types of beings with different types of capabilities within this realm. And when one being says this the way it is, are they saying that this is what it is and the way it is because they understand the objective aspect, or are they speaking from a more subjective perspective, meaning like it's more so from their experience or what they're capable of experiencing, and not necessarily the objective truth. And again, I always tell y'all to always hold me to that same space, because in a lot of cases, this is the way it'll sometimes be, where, we're gonna have little parts of what we say, as much as we speak objectively on the truth, little parts that might be a little more subjective to our experience. Hence why, again, the greatest protection you'll ever have spiritually, one of the greatest protections is knowing yourself to the fullest. You know, knowing your unique aspect of source, you know. But just simply, you know, now is the vibrate. Past, quote unquote, future, quote unquote, existing right now, being experienced all in one space. And that's also in the videos that I've been making about like the quote unquote afterlife. I'm like, in essence, the afterlife, you know, hence why a lot of us even say that, like, you know, like, oh man, the afterlife, like you're dealing with your afterlife right now. Because technically, again, the future, the quote unquote future, in the future, this bodysuit gonna eventually go back to Earth, you know, back to the rental car service, back to the vehicle rental car service. I made an old video about that, but this vehicle in the future is gonna go back to the Earth. I'm gonna transition from out of this vehicle. And because that is the quote-unquote future, and because the future is being experienced right now in this moment, technically, that already happened. That timeline is existing right now, you know? And hence why we even have situations of, like, certain people we might feel like, even though they're not really trying to harm you, let's just say, you know, you might feel like, man, I don't even want to get close to that person. I don't know why. Because it might be a simultaneous timeline where they tried to harm you, you know what I'm saying? Or trying to harm you because it's happening right now. Like another timeline, they trying to, you know, and again, the movie Everything, Everywhere, All at Once kind of helps put that in perspective too, you know, just to have like that type of visual. Because, of course, nothing is better than, you know, your own inner meditations and your own, you know, astral journeys, your own dream journey, you know, like, not to put movies over that, you know, I'm just saying as, you know, like something that simply, like, I feel like to say that movies can't exactly mimic, you know what I'm saying, lucid dreaming and stuff like that, or certain multi-dimensional aspects, that kind of, you know, did the best, one of the best movies of showing like that whole, you know, dynamic, and more so like the, you know, the dynamics between it, like how one part of yourself on one timeline is feeling other parts of yourself on other timelines, you know. And I ain't gonna get deep into it because I already spoke on that, you know, in the videos, multi-dimensional videos, and I got a multi-dimensional playlist that you could check out if you want to, you know, go deeper into that aspect. And matter of fact, this would just be added to it, again, to remember that right now is the vibrate. In the future, the afterlife is right now, quote unquote afterlife, quote unquote past life, all simultaneously right now. So it may not be that I had a bunch of reincarnations, but that due to my ability to access all these different dimensions of myself, and it's now a moment, it could feel like a past life, it could feel like I reincarnated, you know, it could feel like I'm in that timeline or in the past, like when my ancestors existed and doing things the way my ancestors done it. You feel me? So now is the vibrate. Gotta bring it back classic. Not too far in the future, not too far in the past. Right now, y'all know what it is.